Hey, good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Good? All right. Can't hear too much? Okay, thank you. Is this better? No? Okay.
Still not, I think it's still kind of low.
Yeah. Is he right
Yeah,
there?
you need to get to this decibel level.
Yeah, we gotta. All right. There we go. All right. We're feeling it now? Okay. All right. All right, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you all for spending the morning with us, at least a couple minutes of it. I'm Miles Tanner. I lead the healthcare practice at Rapid Scale. It's a Cox business company, and we are blessed to have Katie Patton from Patton Technologies. So, Katie and I have worked together for years. I've learned so much from her, and I'm really excited for her to be able to share more information with this group. She also moonlights as an executive at a health system, a regional health system. So when she's speaking, she's not just speaking from a consultant's perspective, but then also from somebody who lives this in real life. So, Katie.
Thank you, Miles. And thanks to Rapiscale and Cox for having me up here to speak about something I'm very passionate about, and yet trying to tell you you don't have to buy anything from them, more tools, which is the purpose of today's talk. So let's take a little history lesson 3,000 years ago to the ancient days of Troy. Everyone remembers the story. Troy was had these great walls defending their cities against the Greeks. And within these, for 10 years, they defeated every opportunity the Greeks came at them. And then what happens? The Greeks retreat back one day, and they leave at the gates this big, beautiful wooden horse. And they're celebrating so much. They bring the horse inside that night with the city walls open, and they celebrate, and then they go to sleep. And then in the middle of the night, what happens? The Greeks come out from the horse, they open the city gates, allow the other warriors in, and they take over the city. Now, what we learn from this is very similar to healthcare today, cybersecurity today. The Greeks did not have failed walls. Their walls were strong. It was misplaced trust. And what we see today is we have stronger walls than before. We have firewalls, we have endpoint security, we have zero trust architecture, we have compliance frameworks, we have regulatory oversight, we have SIMs. But what we're missing today is that it's not our walls that are weak. It's our trust from within that is. And that is why we need to start mapping it out and thinking about it differently from within.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. So, as you're talking about trust, it's really interesting as we talk about it more. I always hear the implicit versus explicit trust. Could you talk a little bit more about the differences between the two?
Sure. Implicit trust is assumed trust, and that's what we mostly have in organizations today. In healthcare, many IT people just want to get the job done and please the C-suite that's calling or the doctor that's calling saying, hey, get this access to this vendor as much as possible. Vendors are not here to help you in your architecture or make sure that you're a good steward of your environment. Vendors are here to get their job done, get the implementation of their application implemented, and they're not really worried about your cybersecurity protocols. And that's the implicit trust. We just assume everyone's going to do what they're supposed to do. However, whenever we reframe this and we look at this a different way, as explicit trust, that's when we get in beforehand. We start mapping out relationships. We start asking the who's, why's, and where's is this trust assumed. We're looking at contracts before they get signed. How many of us are in any committees or that review contracts before they're signed if you're in technology? No, it's usually after the fact. You have no choice in the matter. You just have to implement it. But they're not following your rules of security. So getting ahead of that, explicitly defining what that trust looks like, and not just assuming everyone's going to be on their best behavior.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, so why now? Why does it matter so much now?
I think it matters now more than ever before because healthcare IT has such integrate ecosystems, complex ecosystems where we have vendors, we have partners, we have remote access, we have cloud services, we have FHIR APIs, we have integrations. Healthcare IT is very vendor dependent. And that is great because it allows us to be more collaborative, deliver patient care quicker, and be more innovative than ever before. But that also comes with every new pathway is a new connection. And that new connection is a new vulnerability for us. And attackers have figured out something very quickly, that it's very hard to break down these walls. It's much easier to to abuse the trust from within. And I think that's what the main purpose that I think we need to leave here today with and thinking about is now that trust is your primary attack surface in healthcare cybersecurity. And if that's true, trust is no longer cybersecurity is no longer an IT problem, it's a clinical problem, and we need to address it as such and bring in the right stakeholders to have that conversation.
Yeah, the stakeholders is interesting. We were talking earlier today about other stakeholders that you need to involve in your governance and your decisions. Could you talk a little bit more about the stakeholders involved in this?
Yeah, to begin with, I think that cybersecurity is a responsibility of everyone in the organization. It's not a CISO's job to implement cybersecurity because the CISO's job is to say, hey, this is not right or this is out of compliance. It's everyone's responsibility because you're that first line of defense. Legal, I would say, really needs to come in early. Legal has the framework. You know, how many of you have actually augmented your BAAs where you now have a vendor agreement? How often do you know? When does a vendor tell you that they've been breached? How often do you have that written into a contract that you have 72 hours to notify us? What we all know what their legal team is telling them. Don't mention this outside, just cut off access. We need to know within a certain amount framework of time. Additionally, I think it's very important to bring in a C-suite sponsor and to have advocates on your side. You know, I always like to say we get a lot more cybersecurity tools whenever we say it's a requirement from our insurance. So making sure that you have C-suite on your side, buy-in, board members, so that they understand that most of these trust issues that we face in our environments today are implemented top-down. It's a cultural thing. And they're just trying to make the C-suite happy. So if you have an advocate on your side to say, no, let's take a pause, tell me why you need this access, who's it for and where's it going, how long do you need it, who makes those decisions? Because it's not going to be some admin granting access in identity management. It's going to have to be someone with authority, an agency to say, we're going to change the culture of an organization.
Yeah, and perfect on the culture as being a pillar of your cyber resiliency and cybersecurity approach. Can you talk a little bit about identity management too as a control plane for zero trust and ultimate trust as an organization?
Yeah, I think that identity management is critical to an organization, and it's so often overlooked. It's often looked as a nuisance, an invisible architecture that we just do, and I think we have to look at it more as a governed asset. It's very important and it's very critical. Yes, there's compliance issues, there's compliance protocols and processes in place to set this up, but who governs that? How do we ask, do they have too many permissions? You know, do we have least privilege? Do we have least privilege implemented in our environment? More often than not, a vendor's going to ask for local admin access on all your servers, regardless of if they need it or not. Who's really looking? Because your identity management folks don't really know that, hey, they don't really need write permissions there. They just need read permissions. They just need access to this folder rather than the entire server. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the stakeholders part of it too. So you always preach on the practice, practice, practice. And so one of the side benefits of engaging the C-suite as a part of your culture is having them engaged in the practicing of your response to that. Can you talk a little bit about practice and how that relates to it?
Yeah, I think that response and resiliency is really repetition. And that's what it really boils down to. Those people, and the C-suite included, are just because you have a plan, an incident response plan, doesn't know how to react to it. The people and the teams that work under pressure practice under pressure and react under pressure, and I think that's critical, including with the C-suite. If you have an incident, unfortunately, you don't have the critical time to escalate that. You don't have the critical time to go up the chain to say, hey, we need to close off the network, because if you do, by that time, it's too late. So who's making those decisions spur of the moment if that's not put into place? And just because you have an incident response plan, That doesn't mean you can execute it well. That all that means is that you've done your due diligence. It doesn't mean that you can execute upon the due care of that design.
And one of the other elements too of the practice is to do that in real world environments too, not just in theory, not just a tabletop exercise, but in real world environments. Could you expand on what that means to be in a real world environment when you're doing the practice?
Yeah, it's really critical because if you're just practicing and you know you're practicing, then you're not going to take it seriously as much seriously, or you're not going to have the same pressures and stresses. I think threat hunting is critical to what. One of the things I like to do is do an independent pen test and not let the folks know to see if they catch it or not. Because just because they catch it or don't catch it, that's a lesson learned for them. That it's not just for a pen test. Most of us think as pen tests as, yep, got the audit pass this year, but that's not quite true. Technology and technologists like to look at it as what we can get from that and lessons to apply to continuous improvement further.
So, healthcare matters, right? Lives are on the line. Can you talk more about why it's so important in healthcare for us to have this suspicion of trust and make sure that we have the right trust models?
Yeah, cybersecurity in healthcare, it's not just a technical problem, it's a patient care problem. Our failures matter more because lives are at stake. And I often find that I tell very direct with vendors and partners that downtime is not an inconvenience for us. Downtime is a delay in patient care and it's critical times, and we need to prevent that as much as possible because we all know what happens whenever downtime and whenever there is an incident. The electronic medical record goes down and it's not accessible. The medication dispensing gets delayed. Diagnostic imaging slows down. Clinicians have to return to workflows that are manual. Patients go into hospitals go into diversion with their patients, and the risks just increase from that. And that's whenever, right then and there, you know that this is a patient safety issue. And this is a patient safety issue because it's so directly connected to the resilience of our digital systems than ever before. And clinicians have to be able to trust that our systems will do their jobs even when they don't work.
So I think about trust too with allowing the Trojan horse in, right? And I think of the humans involved, not just the patients, but then also the teams that you lead as IT executives. What are some suggestions or lessons learned that you have from building that culture from the ground up within the entire organization and especially within the IT group?
Culture is the strongest, most powerful control, the least expensive, and the least discussed, I think, that we have in our toolkit for cybersecurity. We don't really look at it as a cultural change. And technology and systems are not going to predict everything. Usually, the people are the first line of defense. They have that gut feeling, that innate pattern recognition they have, where they can say, hey, something doesn't seem right. Hey, this vendor account is logged in over here. This access shouldn't be here, or system's acting odd, or we've all have those old engineers that work for us that say, oh, I knew that thing wasn't patched for 30 years. What do we do about that? What we find, and what I have found, is that within resilient organizations, escalations happen earlier, and so they're able to be prevented, and they're caught. But that escalation and that voice, that signal, has to be accepted by leadership. If leadership shoots down every escalation as a nuisance, as a noise, people aren't going to speak up. Those catches, those gut feelings are going to get missed. Because yes, machines can catch threats, machines can contain threats, but only we as humans can design those systems of trust that allow the machines to work. And that's what's critical.
And so we've spoken a lot about trust, and trust isn't everything. It's a very important. What are some other suggestions or best practices that you'd like to share with the group that is in addition to trust?
I think really after an incident, the most important thing, because adversity causes us to learn all of a sudden, is that it goes from cybersecurity is not just a a set of tools. Cybersecurity and resiliency is cybersecurity and resiliency is a set of the word. I just lost the word. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of as we go through and we do the practice of it and we do the standard hardening, the day-to-day operations of the IT group and how they're doing the fundamentals like the patching and the maintenance.
Oh yeah. Sorry, remember the word. Cybersecurity, which is better than the patching and everything. Sorry, that could come later if you're good with that. Cybersecurity is more about resiliency and capabilities and not just a set of tools. And this is very important. It's capabilities in your people, capabilities in your governance, capabilities in your response times, and capabilities in your culture. And whenever we start seeing that, we see things change from within an organization, changing from tools to capabilities, from compliance to operational readiness, from assumed trust to trust to govern trust, and most importantly, I think from technical ownership to leadership responsibility and guidance for the entire organization. So now back to, if you want to jump into the other question about some other things beyond just trust.
Yeah.
I think, it's the basics. When you look at all the incidents from all the industries, they really have the same sequence of events. A trusted account is compromised, be it from a phishing incident, credential scraping, a vendor manipulation of an account, and then what do you see that happens? You see that in the environment, nothing really stands out. Nothing changes. It's all subtle. They're creeping around laterally in your environment doing reconnaissance. They're going quietly, they're going quickly, and at the same time, they're escalating privileges. They're gathering more permissions the whole time, and then what happens? Realization sets in. What did we do wrong? We had the right tools, we had the right alerts, we had the right monitoring, but we had the misplaced trust. And I think on top of that, what we also find is we miss the basics. We miss the backups. You can have all the backups in your world, your 3-2-1s, and it's not going to matter if you can't get to them. So, just besides the yearly audit for compliance, do you have immutable backups? Yes. Are you sure? Can you really get to them? Have you checked that out? Because if you ask your engineers, they're going to say, theoretically, yes, but have you tested that? So why not test the backups, failovers every year? I think the other thing is patching. And we all have systems that we can't replace that are Windows 8 servers. And what do we do there? Network segmentation. There's always a way to make it more secure. Now, it's more work, but you have to do that due care besides just due diligence. I think the other thing really is working with the vendors ahead of time. Security reviews on all your contracts ahead of time. Why do you need this access? Why do you need to write to a file share? One of the things I always do, regardless, a vendor says we want this account name. It's usually generic. Never accept the generic account name. Never give away service account passwords too, by the way. But what I always like to do is to force my vendors for service accounts should have one job and one function. It should be explicit in the naming of that service account. So whenever you're monitoring it and you see it touching a server it should not touch, you know something's out of place in your environment.
Yeah. Excellent. Katie, we really appreciate you sharing your insights with the group today. Thank you all for taking the time. So I'll just share, we've got our contact information, so Katie's information on the screen, mine as well. Feel free to snap a picture. We won't get mad at you if you take a picture. And then I'll give that a second here. Okay. And then we have a Brews and Bites over at the Cox booth, that way, the way I'm pointing over there this afternoon. So feel free and stop by, continue the conversation. Again, thank you for the time. And Katie, thank you so much.
Thank you.